President Biden is in Angola today, becoming the first sitting U.S. president to visit the African country. The trip is also Biden's first to a sub-Saharan nation as president. Biden is there in part to promote a multi-billion-dollar rail project that the U.S. hopes will counter Beijing's influence in the region. The project would connect the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Zambia to Angola's port of Lobito, allowing the U.S. to exploit the region's vast mineral resources, including copper and cobalt. The ongoing plundering of resources from the DRC by the U.S. and Europe has led to decades of devastating war, poverty, and environmental destruction. President Biden's visiting Angola as the country prepares to mark the 50th anniversary of its 1975 independence from Portugal. Biden's meeting today with Angola's president. He's also scheduled to give a speech at the country's National Slavery Museum. We're joined now by two guests. Antonio Tomas is an Angolan scholar and associate professor of anthropology at the University of California, Irvine. He's the author of In the Skin of the City, Spatial Transformation in Luanda, and is completing a new book about the civil war in Angola. And Zenaida Machado is the Angola and Mozambique senior researcher at Human Rights Watch. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Antonio Tomas, let's begin with you. Can you talk about the significance of President Biden first sitting U.S. president to visit Angola, and tell us about Angola's history?
Amy, thank you so much and for having me. It's a historical trip to Angola. It's a historical visit, particularly in the context of relationships between Angola and U.S. As we know, Angola and U.S. haven't been properly friends or foes, in the sense that Angola took the side of communist pro-Soviet during the Cold War, right? And then the U.S. were supporting the regimes that tried to uproot the MPLA from power, right? First on the side of the Portuguese during colonialism, and then on the side of FNLA, and then UNITA, and so on. The U.S. only recognized Angola's independence in 1991, 16 years after Angola became independent in 1975. And of course, it has been an effort of, it's a victory of Angolan diplomacy, and because a lot of people have put money and resources and time to get these trips, to get these visiting happening, but it comes also with a lot of problems.
And you mentioned the Civil War that occurred, all the great powers that got involved. Also, Cuba supplied up to 50,000 soldiers to support the MPLA in that war. What was the outcome after the MPLA was able to be victorious in terms of the social conditions of the people of Angola?
It has to be said that the U.S. has always been on the losing side in all the major interventions in Angola, right? They were with the Portuguese lost. They were with FNLA lost. They were with Savimbi's UNITA, and Savimbi UNITA lost, right? And now they with the MPLA, and I believe that MPLA lost the next election as well. So the U.S. has always been on the losing side when it comes to Angola. And of course, it was a major confrontation of two mighty powers during the Cold War. On the one side, the Angola government, the forces of Angolan government, backed by Soviet Union and Cuban troops and so on. And the other side, apartheid South Africa, backed by CIA and supporting UNITA, Savimbi, and so on. And it was tragic for the country, because we're still facing a lot of problems. We're still solving problems of the consequences and how the Cold War has played out in Angola. With millions of people dead, millions of people displaced. We still have a lot of landmines that still have to be extracted from the soil, and the country is still grappling with all these consequences of the Cold War.
And the United States did not recognize Angola's independence until Bill Clinton was president?
Yes, the United States didn't recognize Angola's independence until 1991 when Bill Clinton was president. So Angola actually didn't have normal diplomatic relationships with U.S. until that date. And even when Clinton recognized Angola's independence, it took a long time, from 91 to now, because then, Angola organized, elections after the end of the first Cold War in 91. So the Cold War ended in 91, Angola organized elections in 92, but then Savimbi didn't accept the results of the elections. The country went back to war for more 10 years until Savimbi was killed in 2002. And then, of course, the diplomatic relationships between Angola and U.S. start to be normalized.
I wanted to bring Zunaida Machado into this conversation, who's in Mozambique, in the capital, Maputo, senior researcher at the Africa Division on Mozambique and Angola of Human Rights Watch, previously worked with BBC. If you can talk about the significance, of this first ever trip of a sitting U.S. president to Angola, and what it means that it is tied to the strengthening of business links and what these links are. Why is President Biden there, Zenaida?
Thank you so much for having me. I was listening to the previous guest, and there's one thing that stuck to my mind, the legacy of the Cold War. And one of the legacies of the Cold War in Angola is the habit of propaganda. Doing things for the world to see. And I think this visit by Biden to Angola is a bit of that. Is a visit that tackles the exterior, not the internal problems of Angola. It's focused only on business, on a project that will mostly benefit those that will import from the minerals in Central Africa, but less of Angolans, the majority of Angolans. And if you are in Angola today, you probably also feel the same way, that a lot of these visits has excluded the majority of Angolans. They have been given 2 public holidays, yesterday and today. They cannot come even close to where the Biden convoy will pass to. And those, for example, that wanted to use this opportunity to freely protest and show the American authorities how much they are grieved by the policies that have been adopted by subsequent governments of Angola, were not allowed to do so. So that's the Angola we are talking about. So if you ask what is the significance of this visit to a majority of Angolans, they'll probably say, well, it's a big show. It puts Angola on the map. Angola becomes an important country for the world. João Lourenço, of course, is a big achievement diplomatic for him. But what about the large part of Angolans that are still living under $1 USD per day?
And Zenaida Machado, I wanted to ask you about the former president and the Eduardo de los Santos, and then of his daughter Isabela dos Santos, and the corruption that developed during and especially toward the end of the President dos Santos's 38 years in office. Could you talk to our listeners and viewers about his daughter, Isabela dos Santos, and where she is right now?
I'm not sure where she is at the moment. I know that there is an investigation and a criminal case against her for corruption. an emplacement in Angola, and that the Angolan authorities have requested the international community to help find her and bring her back to Luanda to respond for the crimes that she's accused of. For those who follow Angola, they will know that during the time that her father was president, and that was about 4 decades, she benefited a lot from the state coffers. She became one of the richest women in the world, and probably or arguably the richest woman in Africa. But she has also had the privilege to run the state oil company, and Angola is highly dependent on oil. Oil is the biggest export of the country and the biggest source of revenue. And the daughter of the president was the one in charge of that state company. There were lots of questions about how she qualified, different from other Angolans, to run a state company. She has claimed over the years that she is as qualified as any other Angolan because she's an Angolan citizen. But questions remain as to why would the president appoint his own daughter to run the state money. But it's not just her. Our own brother also ran the country's sovereign fund for several years, and he was, towards the end of his mandate, accused of misusing billions of money that was put in that institution that should have gone to the Angolans to improve the lives of Angolans, and instead were used for the benefit of the family, the Santos family.
So I want to ask Professor Tamash about why President Biden is there at this moment. I mean, to promote the multi-billion-dollar Lobito corridor, that 835-mile railway project connecting the city of Lobito in Angola to the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia as well. This show of U.S. investment is meant to counter China's increasing influence in Africa, the sort of alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Can you talk about that, China's presence in Africa, and where the U.S. stands in relation to that?
We know why Biden is in Angola. You know, we are in a moment of transition from fossil energies to greener energies, and then we know, you know, that in the next few decades, some minerals will be preponderant, very important for, you know, for the economy, for the economy, for the global economy, right? Minerals such as cobalt, lithium, and copper. Right. And we know that some of the sources of these minerals, some of the largest sources for the extraction of these minerals are in close to Angola, right, in the Congo and in RDC and Zambia. And so this is an opportunity. It's a way to sort of revitalize, you know, the Benguela Railway that was built by, you know, by the Portuguese with British and South African interests in the 1900s. So to revitalize this railway, you know, and to be able to transport, to be able to ship the minerals from these sources, you know, to the coast, to Lobito, to the port of Lobito, right? But we also know that Angola provides something that U.S. you know is looking for, you know, in terms of creating partnerships in Africa, because Angola is one of the most stable political regimes in Africa. You know, we have the same ruling party since 1975. We only had 3 presidents, one of them stay in power for almost 40 years, you know. So to have a, you know, an infrastructure that runs for more than, you know, 1,000 kilometers, it will require a great deal of security and safety. And US, of course, sure, or at least they want to be sure that the Angolans can provide that.
And Antonio Tomas, I wanted to ask you, much has been made of the debt that the $40 billion in debt that Angola owes to China. I should remark that that's about half of the debt that Puerto Rico owed to the United States bondholders, tiny Puerto Rico. But how is China regarded by the Angolan people? Because it's been involved in economic development projects in Africa now for decades.
Oh yeah, this is of course. I think it's important to see, when China started to become involved in Angola. That was, after the war, when the boom, the oil boom was also taking place, so Angola had at this moment, a great deal of financial resources and so on. So China got involved, and China, loaned all this money to Angola, and I think now that the country is going through, profound economic crisis, Angola has been struggling to pay these debts. A lot of this money was used for the reconstruction of the infrastructure that were destroyed by the war, point dams, bridges, and so on. But a lot of this money also was used to enrich, for some people to enrich themselves, and particularly to transfer, these amounts of money and to buy property, elsewhere in South Africa or Portugal, in Europe or in US, So a lot of this money have been used or has been canalized, has been used for personal purposes, and now Angolans are paying actually, the debts that the country owes to China, and of course China is still involved in a great deal of projects in Angola, in a great deal of construction and rebuilding, and I think this is the place that US wants to occupy.
I wanted to end by going to Zenaida. Human Rights Watch has written about how the projects connect with crackdowns on protests in Angola, projects that exacerbate poverty and other conditions for people in Angola, only enriching a few. And you're speaking to us from Mozambique. I'm wondering if you can also talk about the ongoing nationwide protests there following the elections in October, when the long-ruling Frelimo party declared victory. The opposition leader, Venancio Mondlane, has repeatedly called on supporters to take to the streets over allegations of voter fraud, as well as Mozambique's debt crisis, corruption, and other issues. Mozambique authorities have unleashed a brutal crackdown on protesters, killing at least 24 people. If you can put those two issues together.
Briefly, let me just end with the Angola element first. I mean, we mentioned that Biden is going to Angola to counter the influence of China, but unfortunately, we haven't seen him doing anything different from what China has done over the past decade, which is to do economic and business deals with the government of Angola and forgetting to implement projects that benefit the rest of the population. And unfortunately, Biden seems to be missing an important opportunity to address serious human rights issues and economic and social inequalities that Angola has been married with over the past few years. And we wanted to use also this opportunity to once again appeal to Biden to use this opportunity to at least get a public commitment from President João Lourenço that he will investigate the human rights abuses, especially those that were committed by his security forces, and all those accountable to account. And of course, the victims need to see mechanisms of redress. Now, going to your question about Mozambique, I mean, Angola and Mozambique are very similar countries. They come from very similar backgrounds, long civil wars, huge influence of the Cold War, and as a consequence of that, they have built these security forces that are very heavy-handed, ruthless, prepared to defend the country and the regime in place against an enemy, not necessarily prepared to defend the population. and the citizens and the constitution. And what we have seen in Mozambique since elections is exactly that. It's a demonstration on how security forces are on the ground to protect the interests of a few group of people that belong to the ruling party. And they're ready to do anything for that, including killing protesters, unarmed protesters, killing children. We have documented that at least 10 children between 1 and 17 years have been killed by security forces, ready to use live ammunition against anyone that dares to go to the streets and challenges the government in place. We have thousands of Mozambicans almost every day going to the streets, protesting in different manners, most of it peacefully, against the election results. They believe the elections were rigged. The Constitutional Council is at the moment analyzing the evidence of rigging. But while the Constitutional Council waits to pronounce itself about the final results, the Mozambican people have the right to go out on the streets. The Constitution provides that, to go out on the streets and protest against what they felt was a flawed process. But the security forces have not allowed them to do that. They have used excessive force against protesters. As a consequence, we have dozens of people killed. Our partners on the ground are speaking about 67 people killed right now as we speak. And that is for what? For 6 weeks of protest. We have also documented cases where children were killed by live bullets, but many children were also seriously affected by the indiscriminate use of tear gas against residences.
Zenaida, we want to thank you so much for being with us. We will continue to cover these issues, both in Mozambique and Angola. Zenaida Machado is Angola and Mozambique senior researcher at Human Rights Watch. She was joining us from Maputo, the capital of Mozambique, formerly with the BBC. And we want to thank Antonio Tomas, Angolan scholar, associate professor of anthropology at University of California, Irvine.